Well, good evening and welcome. My name is Nicole Watson. I am the director of the Catherine G. Murphy Gallery. It's wonderful to have all of you here tonight. Like you, I am looking forward to learning more about the Arts Core program for women. So this event was created to accompany our current exhibition, Judy Chicago's Birth Project Born Again. Our show features selected screen prints and needleworks that first toured the United States in the mid-1980s. In this series, which was created on the heels of the dinner party, Chicago continued to rewrite an art history that had left out women's experiences and women artists. Like the dinner party, the Birth Project was also carried out by Chicago and collaborators all over the United States. What I learned by working with this exhibition is that Chicago's methods of creating women-centered artwork among and within a community of other women became hallmarks of the type of work we do here in our art department and in programs like the Women's Art Institute. About a month ago, I had the great fortune to participate in a conversation with two women artists and educators that I admire very much, Ann Jennings and Patricia Olson. They made it very clear to me that our gallery and the St. Kate's Fine Art Collection, both of which emphasize exhibiting and educating about diverse women artists, are legacies not only of the work that Chicago has been doing for decades, but of the Arts Core program itself. It is an honor to be part of this community and to continue this legacy. It's also an honor to be a collaborator here tonight. Before we begin our discussion, we have a few sentiments of gratitude to express. First, I'd like to thank the Friends of the Gallery for sponsoring our Judy Chicago show. Their support made it possible for us to host this national touring exhibition. I'd also like to thank Sharon Doherty. Sharon, you want to wave? Sia Vang and the Abigail Quigley McCarthy Center for Women, as well as Patricia Olson and the Women's Art Institute for co-sponsoring tonight's event. Last but certainly not least, special thanks to tonight's panelists for their willingness to delve into this piece of institutional and cultural history. Please join me in welcoming tonight's moderator and the director of the Women's Art Institute, Patricia Olson.
Well, thanks, Nicole. So, I'm happy to be here with you today during Women's History Month to help shed some light on what some might say is a hidden history here at St. Catherine University. I'm talking about the Arts Core program for women, one of the first feminist visual arts education programs in the country. It was innovative, radical, empowering, and ultimately controversial. However, before I introduce our panelists and give a short introduction to the Arts Core program, as director of the Women's Art Institute, I'm obliged to tell you a little bit about it. It, too, is an innovative and empowering experience for women artists. Founded by Elizabeth Erickson at Minneapolis College of Art and Design in 1999, the heart of the Women's Art Institute is a 4-week summer studio intensive course for advanced women artists every June. Over 18 years that we've been offering this course, we have welcomed everybody from fiber artists to ceramicists to sculptors to painters to printmakers to performance artists, installation artists, and every kind of combination that you can imagine. Students have ranged from 19 to 78, and they come from all over the country. Participants in the Institute work closely with the teachers, Anna Garsky, Anna wave, she's in the back there, and myself, and each student presents a major portfolio of new work at the conclusion of the course. We also hear from a dozen of local artists and art historians, engendering context and a sense of community. And here's a picture of a field trip to Hazel Belvo's studio last year. Brochures for the upcoming Summer Studio Intensive, June 4th through the 28th, are available. The application deadline is April 30th. If you're interested or know of somebody who might benefit, please grab a brochure in the table in the lobby. or let me know. One more thing. In conjunction with MCAD, Women's Art Institute is hosting an event specifically for Indigenous women and women of color to learn more about the Women's Art Institute. It's March 21st, 6:45 p.m. at MCAD. So again, if you know of anyone who might benefit from this, please tell them about this opportunity. Okay, so the commercial is over. So the format for tonight's presentation will be a short history of the Arts Corps program for women, complete with PowerPoint slides. And, sorry. And when tonight's panelists are featured, presented in the presentation, that's when I'm going to introduce them. And then if she wants to, each one will make a brief statement at that time. When we're finished with the slides, I will pose some questions to the panelists, and your questions are welcome as well at the end. We're planning to finish in about an hour and a half, after which we will have refreshments in the lobby area. So, I want to give a brief context for the Arts Corps program. For those of you who either weren't there in the 1970s or forgot all about it. or repressed it. So, the 1970s, sexism becomes a word. One of the most succinct descriptions I've read about the 70s comes from Frances Borzello. Quote, "It was an exciting, bad-tempered, and creative time. And by bringing ideas and issues into the open, it gave women the courage to speak for themselves." So going back a little further, even starting in the late 19th century, women were finally able to take their arts education for granted. For instance, the Minneapolis College of Art and Design, founded as the Minneapolis School of Fine Arts in 1886, had an inaugural class of 28 students, 26 of them women. By mid-20th century, even though over half the art school population was female, nearly all the teachers were male, and attitudes that questioned the seriousness of women students were commonplace. Here they are nicely summarized by Kirsten Swinth in her History of American Women Painters. So, here are beliefs about women art students. Number one, women students lacked originality and the drive that comes from genius. Remember, Linda Nochlin has told us that genius, the category of genius, excludes women. 2, women did not take art seriously. 3, women only went to school to get a husband, then they'd quit art. 4, women were good at following directions and winning prizes, but lacked creativity. These were truisms right up to the women's art movement. If you were a student and a woman learning art, you ran into these on a regular basis. The women's movement in general particularly galvanized women artists, and there was a lot of organizing on the East and West Coasts. In fact, women were organizing everywhere, really, and these were some of the groups we heard about here in the Twin Cities. Judy Chicago, in particular, founded important programs in California, and they're on the right-hand side there, that were prototypes for the Arts Corps program, specifically the Fresno Feminist Art Program in the upper right, and Woman House, which was a project of the Feminist Art Program at California Institute of the Arts. Before the Arts Corps program formally launched here at St. Catherine, the College of St. Catherine hosted an important exhibition in January of 1974, Women's Work, 11 Artists. Carol had work in that show. The next January of 1975, At the same time of the Feminist Art Workshop was launched, Chicago's Metamorphosis exhibition was mounted here in these galleries. And these are covers of the catalogs. Conceived as a feminist immersion program, the Arts Corps included consciousness-raising discussion groups, studio work in traditional women's crafts, performances and role-playing, as well as the study of art history from a feminist viewpoint. And this was before there were any texts from a feminist viewpoint. In this brochure, documenting the Feminist Art Workshop, this was in January of '75, one of the students commented, and this was pretty typical, quote, "Reticence is behind me. I am finally taking myself and other women seriously. My eyes and mind are opening and absorbing the earth. I am enraged by society, but nonetheless carried and amazed by my aspirations." Now, instructor Ann Jennings also wrote in this brochure, and you placed the program in context, quote, "The women's revolution for freedom in our time reflects our own goals and purpose as a Catholic women's college, for it requires a commitment to critical discernment and a profoundly spiritual struggle to achieve full personhood and full participation in human society. The awakening of half the human race reflects Christian ideology in the very deepest sense." And we can argue about that later, maybe. But that's... Yes. So, the Feminist Art Workshop was essentially a precursor to the larger Arts Corps program. And that was in January interim course of 1975. And it was facilitated in part by Chicago herself. And there she is in the middle. The other faculty were art historian Sister Judith Stoughton. And she's on the picture on the left. She's in front of the door. Let's see if I can't. There she is. That's Sister Judith. And artists Ann Jennings on the far right and Carol Fisher. So now I'm going to introduce Ann to you. Ann, who was Sister Ann when she taught in the Arts Corps, holds a BA degree from the College of St. Catherine and a master's degree in printmaking from New Mexico State University, as well as additional study in drawing and printmaking from the Corcoran School of Art in Washington, D.C. Now Professor Emerita at St. Catherine, she taught here for 33 years before retiring in 2008. She was chair of the Department of Art and Art History and served on numerous faculty committees. She continues to investigate intaglio printing and maintains a fabulous and legendary garden. Anne, would you like to say a few words?
Well, just a few words.
Okay.
I hope this isn't going to be too long. I do have something to add to all that. When I first came here, I had completed a whole course of master's coursework in English at the University of Minnesota with related fieldwork in studio art and art history. After the program, the very next year, as soon as I could get out of here, I went away to study and do the master's do the Corcoran work and the master's in New Mexico. All right. But I was here. Much of the work of setting all this up had been done before I came. But I participated with Carol Fisher in that feminist art workshop prior to, it was a way of preparing for the Arts Corps program teaching. And it was like a training session from Judy, and at the same time it was an interim course for the students. Subsequently, for some reason, I was assigned to be director of the program, and to prepare further, I went out to Los Angeles in the summer. And I went there as a student, enrolled in the feminist art program out there, in the women's building, And I was also intensively mentored over the summer by Arlene Raven, art historian Arlene Raven, and Ruth Iskin, who together with Sheila de Bretteville, who was a graphic designer there, were directing the programming at the Women's Building. Judy Chicago by this time was really actively engaged in the dinner party projects, so she was sort of minimally involved in what was going on at the Women's Building. However, I met with her regularly because it was at that time that Judy asked me to collaborate with her on writing a feminist version of the book of Genesis in the Bible, the creation and generation parts. Originally, she intended that that narrative would accompany the dinner party art installation. As it worked out, I met with her, by the way, every Saturday morning in her studio in Santa Monica. As it worked out, however, as the dinner party piece expanded, developed, it really wasn't necessary to have a narrative because the visual work itself became a genesis and a genealogy, honoring all the women left out of art history, even the female figures from mythology, etc., all the way up from the beginning of recorded time, at least in art history in the West, to the modern period. I am the radical nun from St. Catherine's, referred to in her book on the Birth Project, and I am the young radical nun referred to in her biography by Gail Levin, which struck me as particularly amusing because, I mean, both identifications, because I'm exactly the same age as Judy Chicago. I was born the same year.
Okay. Thank you, Anne. So the other instructor, of course, was Carol Fisher. So I'll tell you a little bit about Carol. Carol earned her BFA from Minneapolis College of Art and Design. It was probably Minneapolis School of Art back then. Yes? Maybe?
I can't remember.
Yeah. But nevertheless, she got an MFA from Pennsylvania State University, which I think is still Pennsylvania State University. After her time at St. Kate's, she taught for over 25 years at MCAD and retired as the director of the graduate program in 2010. And by the way, she was a member of my MFA thesis committee there.
Right.
Yeah. And she holds the title of Professor Emerita. She is a multimedia installation artist whose topics include rape, the Exxon Valdez oil spill, and the Challenger Space Shuttle explosion, and she has exhibited her work internationally. She is a founding member of WARM and maintains a studio in the California building. Carol.
Okay, I'm going to roll over here. Back. Thank you all for coming tonight. Is this working? Yes, yes, okay. Well, then I'm going to sing. No. I just wanted to, I found miraculously my notes from on the computer that I did in April, on April 5th, 1973. Judy Chicago was in the Twin Cities, co-sponsored by the University of Minnesota Art Department and the College of St. Catherine, now known as St. Catherine's University. In April of 1973, I went to that lecture here. I'm going to skip a little bit of this. I'm not going to read for hours. Chicago presented her ideas on and experiences with the feminist education program that Pat has mentioned at CalArts, together with Judy Chicago, and founded by herself and Miriam Shapiro, as I just said. She presented her ideas and experiences with the feminist education program at CalArts in California and showed slides of the innovative Woman House project, which was a house that women did in LA, projects on site in 1972. So this is 1973. In her lecture, Judy Chicago stressed the importance of separate art education for women. And when we had the program here, we had the whole third floor to ourselves, which was wonderful, but it was also very threatening. She urged female artists to create their own images of themselves and to make art that drew on their personal experiences, feelings, and reality. Women, she concluded, should also take responsibility for organizing and transforming their communities. So there were students in the program from enrolled from the 5 college consortium in St. Paul, MCAD in Minneapolis, St. Catherine's, and women artists from the community. WARM was just forming at this time. WARM opened in March of 1976 formally, after we renovated the space in the warehouse district in Minneapolis. And during that time, I've lost my train of thought now, so I'm going to go back to this. In addition to the students and Twin City women artists who were in the process of organizing, as I said, we were meeting in each other's studios, having exhibitions in places around the Twin Cities, and forming a slide registry that we could share and that could be shared with education departments in the area. A key faculty member was Robert Clark Nelson, a designer and artist who was the director of the art program here, the department here, for years. Also, person really key was department chair and art historian Catherine C. Johnson, who left then in 1974 to go to the Minneapolis Institute of Art and run their education program. Sister Ann has already talked about Sister Judith Stoughton. I was hired then in 1973. I was the one of the feminist artists that was doing outrageous work in the community and in my work, so I was on people's radar. And from 73 to 75, Robert Clark Nelson, Judith Stoughton, Catherine C. Johnson, and myself raised grant money to bring in a whole lot of feminists from the East Coast and West Coast. And I think I'm going to leave it there, except I have a great thing from the Guerrilla Girls. Hang on. You mentioned Linda Nochlin, her book, and her question, why have there been no great women artists? And to answer that, to rephrase that, this is an old teacher here looking through her stuff. One of these days I'll get organized.
Well, maybe Carol, we could go on and you can come.
It.
Excellent. I knew it.
I know it took a while, but you know. The Guerrilla Girls, I'm sure most of you know, is a group of women artists and arts professionals who fight discrimination ongoing and have been at it for a long time. They reframed Linda Nochlin's question, why haven't there been more great women artists throughout Western history? Instead, they asked and they ask us, why haven't more women been considered great artists throughout Western history? And I think now, we're at a time's up, #MeToo, another time of great movement and hope and pushing for women. We know how to push. We push forever. Okay, I'm done.
Thanks, Carol. Okay, so we're going to look at some more images from the January interim, 1975. As has been mentioned, a number of resource people interacted with the students. On the left here is Arlene Rabin, art historian Arlene Rabin, and an unknown person in the middle, unknown to me anyway. So there were a number of activities. Among them was an anger workshop. No, Anne thinks that was perhaps in the more formal Arts Corps one. On, okay, students threw their shoes where? At the vents. It was a problem. Okay, so a little bit of getting set straight here. Yeah. Students were assigned themes for their projects. There was one on the mother and one on the father. There were also investigations on self-image.
This is one of Sam's work.
In the middle is one of Sandra's works. Nice, Sam. A particularly memorable event was a performance ritual in a large snow ring at the University of Minnesota in which brooms were set on fire. Yes, ma'am.
Can I say a little bit about
Absolutely.
just a few words? This is
Microphone.
wonderful. Okay, sorry. This is one of the wonderful. Is this on? Yeah. All right. Wonderful experiences and just dynamic experiences. So it was a collaboration with students from the University of Minnesota. University of Minnesota art students built this snow berm, and inside were inserted flashlights, old technology. Here we go. And so there were these lights spotted around. Whose dog is that? And some of us from the Arts Corps, most of the students, I participated. Set brooms afire, and that's what is burning there. And it was just a cold winter night, kind of like the winter we're experiencing now. Anyway, okay.
Yeah, thanks. I wish I had been there. The January interim ended with an exhibition by the students. Do take a look at on the left, the students working on the scaffolding, because you'll see it in the next slide. But in the image on the right, here is Sandra Taylor consulting with her colleagues. So I would like to introduce Sandra to you now. Sandra Menifee Taylor earned a BFA degree from Minneapolis College of Art and Design and joined Warm Gallery in 1977. A self-described materialist, she uses many forms in her socially engaged art practice, including artist books, drawing, sculpture, video, installation, and performance. She collaborated for over 2 decades with photographer Linda Gamble to make the voices of rural women heard, championing sustainable agriculture long before that became a buzzword. Her work has been exhibited nationally, and she has received many grants and commissions, including one from St. Catherine University to help us celebrate our 100th anniversary in 2005. A major retrospective of her work, along with a monograph, was mounted by the Plains Art Museum in 2014. She currently teaches art making to memory loss patients, and she is about to open a new exhibition with artist Juliana Frio at Form and Content Gallery next week. Sandra.
Well, in order to, now, am I talking to this thing right? Can you hear me? You can? Now can you hear me? Better. All right. When I took the January program here, and I was also a senior at the College of Art and Design, and those sentences you just saw a little bit earlier about the description of me, that's how I was greeted. I was 31, and it took me all that time to figure out that I had bought the wrong story. And I had a little girl in me that said, "Didn't we always promise we'd be an artist?" And I wasn't. So I had taken myself to art school then with 3 kids and a husband and all of everything that went with that. And there was not another soul in art school with those credentials. And it was hell. That's all I got to say. All the teachers were my age or younger, and they had already figured out how to interact with women artists. I mean, women students. Young, very young women. And so at 31, I was scared to death myself just getting there, and being treated like I wasn't there was worse yet. So 2 or 3 of us women who had we had one woman artist, and she was herself 22. So we convinced the College of Art and Design to let 3 or 4 of us come to this program. So that is how I survived my last year in college. Was doing 2 programs with the experience that you're hearing about here, and then going back for my degree to professors who said, "What, are you crazy? What are you doing over there looking at that stuff? I mean, those are just women artists." So that's my experience of being a student in 1975.
Thank you, Sam. Okay, so again, take a look at the students on the scaffolding on the left here, because they were working on the background for this piece on the left. There was an exhibition at the end of that January interim that transformed the studio classrooms of this building. So the 1975 January interim class was deemed highly successful by the Visual Art Department, and the workshop provided the impetus for a more ambitious 2-year-long program, the Arts Core Program for Women, organized by women for women. It was conceived as an alternative to the regular program for sophomore art majors. Let's see. That's what that part of the diagram says. And it also, as Sam was saying, enrolled students from the ACTC, MCAD, and Metropolitan State University. 30 students between the ages of 19 and 43 began the program in the fall of 1975. So what we have on the left here is the documentation of words and images from the interim feminist art workshop, and then at the right is the diagram that the department had put together for their plans. So now we're up to fall semester 1975, the beginnings of the what was to be a 2-year program for the Arts Corps program for women. And Marisol, the sculptor Marisol, showed up, evidently, and did some face painting. Here's Marisol on the left. I have no idea how you guys got her. She is a famous recluse, but here she is. And then there was also a mask making workshop, and we have Terry in the left on the image on the top. So now I'd like to introduce Terry. Terry Hawthorne holds a BA in Women's Studies and Media Communication from Metropolitan State University and an MS in Women's Studies from the Minnesota State University at Mankato. Since 1988, she has taught women's studies as an adjunct graduate faculty member at the University of Minnesota and for the Minnesota State University system. She retired from teaching in First College at Metropolitan State University, where she was the Women's Services Director. Terry is a longtime community activist and has co-produced with filmmaker Kathleen Laughlin. Kathleen, will you wave? There she is. A number of documentary videos, including the work in progress, We Will Harbor You, A History of the Minnesota Battered Women's Movement. She has also co-authored the book Stars in Your Bones and The Many Faces of the Great Mother. Terry, a few words?
Hello, everybody. I am in the middle of laryngitis. I can't believe it because I've been so excited. So that my backup is Reverend Roberta Haskin here, a good friend who will take over reading for me if I can't finish and if I start to bother anybody too much. I am up there, but I'm also down here with one of the Art Corps people, Helen Torrens, and this was an amazing meditative experience. It was a wonderful, wonderful day. And I want to say about Marisol, I have the tissue. We all did face painting before we did this, and I have the tissue from Marisol. I asked her if she was going to do anything with it, and she gave it to me. I'd like to get that to the department. I was 38 years old when I registered for the St. Catherine's Feminist Art Program on the advice of Sister Judith Stoughton. She was my colleague on the St. Paul Diocesan Women's Diaconate Task Force. And she was very excited, and she convinced me that this new program was very special, an opportunity of a lifetime. And she was right. I was in a lifetime marriage, the mother of 4 sons, ages 4 to 12, the eldest of 7 children in a large extended clan family. Today, my immediate family is 25, and my husband of 56 years, I think, this year, is sitting over there. You want to wave? I did not consider myself an artist. I did not draw like my sister and my father. I knew I was a feminist. I was a photographer, and I had been creating slide presentations for rituals and for education. I had just finished an hour-long documentary, A New Call, on women's ordination at the Minneapolis College of Art and Design. In the 70s, there was a large, active feminist community in the Twin Cities, and I belonged to a number of these organizations, including membership on many committees at the St. Paul YWCA. I was chairperson for my local St. Paul Park Board, and I co-chaired the exciting 1975 Minnesota United Nations International Women's Day at the Minnesota State Fair. This was the precursor of the UN's International Women's Conferences. As part of this project, I had procured funding and commissioned artist Catherine Nash to create a large steel sculpture honoring Minnesota women. This still stands on the state fairgrounds here in Minnesota. I hadn't planned to return to college until my youngest son, who was 4, had entered school, but I was able to enroll him in a Montessori program here on campus. I love the title of tonight's program, When Everything Was New. The 1970s were an exciting time to be a feminist, and spending these years with 30 intelligent, creative, risk-taking, critically thinking, challenging artists was an incredible privilege. Poet Muriel Rukeyser says, "What would happen if one woman told the truth about her life? The whole world would split open." For most of the women in the Art Corps, we did speak the truth of our lives to one another. We listened to one another, and our worlds did indeed split open.
Thank you, Terry. So I'm just inserting here some examples of student work. Remember, we're in fall of 1975 now. And one of the things that's always interesting to me when I, as director of the Women's Art Institute, is to just see how the same themes are running through women's work 40-some years later. So then there was another interim course for January 1976. Here is student work from that interim exhibition, according to the labels on the slides that I got. There's Carol in the lower right, taking pictures of what can only be Sam's pieces. Am I right? Oh. All right, well, wrong again. I thought those white dome pieces were Sandra's, but she tells me they're Pat Neer's. And during spring semester, artist Miriam Shapiro, who has been referred to, she was a partner with Judy Chicago in founding the feminist art program at Cal Arts. And a very important feminist artist, and so she was here. She's the one in red during the spring of '76. Yes.
Miriam had an exhibition here in the gallery.
Okay.
Did a workshop with the students, and also was present and a kind of a founding mother and spirit of Warm Gallery in March of 1976.
Okay.
There was such a connection between, we fed each other.
Okay.
The Arts Corps program here and the women that were coming in, the feminists, and the Minnesota women artists, the 40 of us, with getting warm up and started. There was this exchange all the time and these connections.
Yeah, I recall meeting a lot of the women who went on to Warm here at events around the Arts Corps program at St. Kate's. So. Also in spring semester, there was a collaborative quilt making. Again, traditional women's crafts were explored. But also in spring semester,
I had one outfit, I know this.
So spring semester brought heavy scrutiny to the program from other parts of the college. Even though it was popular with students and the larger community, the Arts Corps program lasted only 1 year of its projected 2-year pilot. According to The Wheel, which is St. Kate's student newspaper, on February 12, 1976, when it was reported, the faculty voted overwhelmingly to adopt an educational policy committees, and that's an elected committee of the faculty, a motion for a 1-year moratorium. Departmental minutes and memos document internal tensions within the visual arts department. Some faculty members, and this is in the larger college, objected to its conceptual basis and its presumed financial burden. Other concerns included consciousness raising as an inappropriate pedagogical method, instruction, quote, behind closed doors, unquote, and allegations of the propagation of lesbianism. The EPC motion also called for a full evaluation and the opportunity to revise the program.
Remember the burning broom witches.
The subsequent review by the curriculum committee did not substantiate these concerns and exonerated the program, in fact. The program was fully funded by outside grants, and the pedagogy was deemed educationally sound. Student evaluations indicated strong support and approval. In this Wheel article, Sister Judith Stoughton defended the Arts Corps program, saying that it, quote, deals with living things rather than paper things, unquote, and offered the opinion that, quote, it's going to go on, but it will go on elsewhere. We've lost our chance at CSC, unquote. Indeed, the faculty was burned out and its supporters mightily discouraged. Despite its optimistic and enthusiastic beginnings, the program did not return for a second year. However, the semester did close with a student exhibition. And just kind of one more comment on how some things stay the same. On the image on the left is hanging plaster cast body parts. And we had a piece exactly like that in the Women's Art Institute exhibition last summer. So, oh, those are Sandra's. All right. And second to the last slide, here's some more student artwork. Okay. Pat Atmar-Nier, yeah. Yeah. So finally, hello. I'm revving up for my. In fact, the gratitude of all women artists everywhere go to the women of the Arts Corps program for their vision and courage. Many people were paying close attention to what was happening here in 1975 and 76, and they went on to build on it. Thank you. Okay, so this is no good.
No, I pulled up the sheet.
Was this one?
We've got several of them.
Okay, how's this one? Better. So now we're going to move on to the question portion. I have some questions prepared. If you have questions along the same lines, please get our attention and we'll have a discussion or something. All right. So, Anne, I want to start with you. Sure. So could you tell us a little bit more about why and
How the Arts Corps came to St. Kate's, you touched on that in your statement, but why here specifically?
Well, the planning was essentially done. Everything was in place when I came on the scene. So that, I was aware just from reading Judy's biography about Judy Chicago's visit in '73 when she had the lecture at the university. So I think Carol's the one who might be able to answer much of this, because she was involved with Katherine Johnson and with Robert Clark Nelson. One thing I would like to say about Robert Clark Nelson. All right, okay. This is someone who came here from Bethel College, a Baptist, who had the vision to put his neck out to cultivate this happening at St. Catherine's.
Remember Robert.
Clark Nelson, yes. Well, Judy Chicago set it in motion in '73, and then, as I said, Robert, Judith Stoughton, myself, set to work to raise grant money, develop a curriculum that you saw, and then the first in Catherine C. Johnson also, who I mentioned, who became the education director at Minneapolis Institute of Art when she left here. She curated this exhibition. That was '74, the interim, the January. '75, the interim in January was Judy Chicago, Metamorphosis. And '76 was myself and Betsy Damon with our Changes exhibition.
Who were those funders that stepped up in the beginning?
The McKnight, Bush, Jerome, those are the ones I remember.
And the St. Paul companies, before Travelers bought them up. They were really committed to the arts and to education.
why do you think that? Why? So that's how it happened. That's a bad one.
Because of what was in the air, because it was everything was new, everything was exciting. We were rediscovering women ourselves for another round of rediscovery of feminism. It was a climate that was in the air.
Carrie,
And
you have to hold it real close.
I agree that it was the climate, that there were things happening. And I would also like to acknowledge that the community of the Sisters of St. Joseph in the 1960s and the 1970s were active in many, many ways for equality of women out in this community and outside, working on women's equality and civil rights and social justice. In 1974-75, I did that documentary I mentioned, and I interviewed many women from the community of Sisters of St. Joseph who were leading these efforts, and some of them went on to form the first shelters for battered women. In the early 70s, a group of academic nuns at St. Kate's responded to their awareness that they had education opportunities that had not been available to many of their sisters, their literal sisters and the metaphorical sisters. And they created a summer institute for returning homemakers, addressing the barriers for these women. The faculty offered a program with almost no cost. I can't remember if it was $10 for 3 credits, something like that. And they created an outstanding children's daycare program with corresponding hours to the academic classes. This was a real gift to individual women and to the community there really wasn't something called Returning Women in Education, and they helped start that. I attended for several years with 2 friends and our 12 combined children. The art department responded to these concerns and the appalling statistics on women artists by instituting a policy to exhibit women's only art. It's hard to imagine how little opportunity there was to see women's art at this time. I visited the gallery in about 74 with my 2 preschoolers in tow, right here in the next gallery. And I realized that I had never been in a gallery where the artwork was about women's life experiences as told by women. Till that very moment. The exhibit was thought-provoking, funny, and provocative. There was a piece about a famous tennis match with Billie Jean King and a large classic plexiglass sculptural piece by Carol Fisher that included painted sanitary napkins. The space was overwhelming and I cried.
Dan, you wanted to, which one works?
Okay. I just wanted to say that that the feminist art program didn't just arrive full-blown like Athena out of the head of Zeus. I mean, the whole 70s and part of the 60s there were all these movements questioning authoritarian structures, authority structures, canons, in literature and certainly in art and art history. The other movement, beside like the civil rights movement, the women's movement in general, the Vietnam anti-war movement, I'm thinking of the Vatican II movement. Vatican II took place from, 62 to 65, and it opened the convent doors so that nuns moved out again into the community, changed their dress to modernize. Vatican II put the liturgy in the vernacular. It redefined the church as the people of God, not the hierarchy, but the people of God. So all of those movements had already been, all over the place. The Vatican II tried to democratize religion. Judy Chicago and the feminist art movement were a movement to democratize the institution of art.
And Judy Chicago is still at it. I mean, look online or see her work. And the dinner party, the Women's Museum in Washington, D.C., I believe, is coming up on their, 20th year? And they are showcasing Judy Chicago.
Could you talk a little bit about Judy's specific contributions, what you remember of when she was here?
She had a hell of a work ethic. I mean, one of the things I think that made the educational atmosphere when the program was going is we all stayed from dawn till dusk because there was art history going on. This is before the books were written about why were there no women artists. That was just coming out. And we were writing at the time, Sister Judith would just drop, she'd keep pushing us to go farther into research of symbols and things, and we were naming goddesses that existed, years ago, and then somebody would learn that, and then they'd tell that, and then, so nobody went home. They all stayed at school.
And that, working late through the night, closed third floor, that raised those questions.
Yes.
it wasn't, the energy wasn't our undoing, it was, we did a lot of work, prep work, meetings, talking about what was going to be involved with the program before we started. But it wasn't enough, obviously.
I think Judy is one of the few geniuses I've ever met. She's brilliant, she's an innovator, a critical and creative thinking feminist with a well-trained artist with that strong work ethic. She grew up in a family where social justice issues were paramount, and she's continued that work throughout her life. She is bold and blunt and a force to be reckoned with. In a group setting, she's unexpected. She can be warm and incredibly nurturing, and she can be brutal and unexpected back. I consider it one of the great privileges of my life to have a relationship with her.
I would like to comment to Anne. If you were called a radical nun, that's a compliment. Because your sister, you got to the roots. This whole community, you went and got to the roots. That's what that, you birthed the roots of who we really all are. So it's almost, I had said to Anne, it's like restorative justice tonight for me. All of us where we belong.
So I'm just going to recap for our tape here what Sister Jane McDonald said. Basically that being called a radical nun is a compliment, and what we're seeing here tonight is restorative justice. Thank you. So, I guess what I'm fishing for is maybe some specific anecdotes, perhaps, about interacting with Chicago in class, if you can recall anything. I mean, what was she like to work with?
Well, I think Terry described her personality and the toughness and the softness. And she was like that working with. She didn't take any prisoners. How's that? And she made us work, as Sandra talked about.
She wasn't here for most of the art corps itself. She had been very active the year in January when we started. The backlash to the program started very early, and as I recall, she was supposed to have come in and been active in the program. It was decided it was better not to have her on campus, and so she did not come at all during the 9 months of the art corps.
I don't remember that particular information, but I know that those of us in the program were suspect when Phyllis Schlafly, you remember Phyllis? She gave a talk at O'Shaughnessy Auditorium, and so some of us in the program, we were there with our picket signs saying, not every St. Catherine's faculty supports her position. And I was grabbed and called a communist. I mean, it wasn't physical, but that was kind of what was happening in the air. But we had each other, we had the support, we were connected like we are today, and try to stay connected to each other. We have WARM. WARM does not have a physical gallery now on 2nd Street in downtown in the Warehouse District, but they have an organization with a 30-year program of mentoring WARM artists, mentoring women, younger artists in the community. So that goes on. Kathleen, can I ask you what, I'm taking over you, Rona. What about women's film, Twin Cities Women's Film Collective?
She didn't warn me she might do this, so my dates probably, I know that our real innovation came together in '75 when we started working on a film about me. What can I do? They're taping it. Oh, okay. There was a Twin City Women's Film Collective that came out of a consciousness raising group, which I remember, in the big dome building on the university campus. And at one point we divided into people that wanted to do photography and people that wanted to do film and people that wanted to, I don't know, write, so, little little projects developed. And in one of them we met Meredith because Meredith's daughter Deborah was in that group sometimes. And so that's the first time I remember meeting them anyway. And soon we were talking about making, a documentary about Merida. And that got finished in '76. So the years before that is when we were working on it, and maybe the strongest. When we had that done, we talked about, well, should we be a distributing thing, force, or, but it did kind of peter out, I have to say, for no good reason. That enough?
You're still making films, Kathleen.
Yes, I am, and probably more people than I even know are from sitting in that room. And I do have some historical things that I will be giving to someone, because a lot of it ended up with me.
Thanks, Kathleen. Since the mic has moved to the audience, questions? Your questions. Ms. Garski.
Hi. I just wanted to extend my gratitude from my generation to yours, and I already have ideas about preservation of this legacy for future generations, because it's something that younger folks often don't hear a lot about. But my question is for Sam as a student of this program, thinking way back to when you were taking it. I know I've experienced aha moments as a student when I took Women's Art Institute, and Pat and I often have helped students have those aha moments when we teach. I'm wondering what was a moment of revelation for you when you were in this program? If you can think of a specific piece or a specific interaction that you had with any faculty, a revelatory moment for you.
I'm going to repeat that for the tape. Did you have, Sandra in specifically, did you have any sort of revolutionary moment or aha moment in the Arts Corps program?
Well, I have to weave this a little bit. Back to how Terry was describing Judy Chicago. She has the waterfront covered in terms of her abilities. And my first encounter was, does anybody here remember that the galleries, both galleries, when the building was constructed, it has brick walls? They are now covered. Suppose you're going to want to know why. Judy was, this was when she had her first show here, and she brought in her drawings and paintings and took a look at two galleries that were all brick. Guess what she did? She said, I'm not putting up any of my work on walls that are not prepared to show paintings. That's it. I obviously remember that as standing up for herself. She just said, what the hell? Brick walls in a gallery? I don't think we can do that. So I carry that every time I get sick and whiny about what I can't get done. You just do that. Yeah.
And I have a moment. Is the mic working?
No.
Sister Judith was an art historian, and she used a lot of non-traditional educational methodologies. And she said in the beginning that she didn't want to be the lecturer. She wanted it to be participatory. And so we had assignments. They were pretty broad. We had to research a pre-Christian art and a contemporary artist and a contemporary art historian. And we went crazy. And we were supposed to not share a paper with a teacher, but share that research and information and excitement with each other. And so we had this calendar, and we began to fill it up. And Judith, my aha moment was Judith saying, "Hey, wait, I want to be on here too. I've got things to say to you too." And she had created such excitement that she had to fight for her space.
Other questions? Then here and then there. You first.
Anne, can you speak to what it was like? What was your experience in '76 in the fall with the dissolution of the core program to coming back to the classroom?
Asking Anne to talk about the experience in '76 when the program was dissolved.
Well, it was devastating. It was devastating. It was devastating, I think. I mean, it was devastating for us, but I thought it was really awful experience for the students. It was like an investigation was going on, and they were all called in, charged. The EPC, the Educational Policies Committee, had charged the Curriculum Committee to interview students. Remember that, to find out what untoward things were going on in the program. What was also devastating is the department was so disunified. We had people in the department actively working against, undermining, sabotaging, working against what we were doing.
Right.
Right. I mean, I think some of that needs to be said. And in the college, there were questions about methodologies, about using consciousness raising, and we're not psychotherapists, like you need to be to ask somebody what their experience is.
But we did have a counselor on staff.
We did, Louise Heinecker.
Yes.
And not only that, when we did the anger workshop, she came and talked about anger. And that was one of my illuminating moments. I mean, that I've kept with me all my life. She pointed out that anger is almost always a cover for fear or hurt. And that makes a lot of sense to me. So the anger I feel about what the dissolution of this program. Yes. I felt at times that we had all we could do not to stop the students from burning down the college. At least the art building. Am I wrong? No. So that it really almost stopped all of us. And I think we each withdrew into our own selves. Like I said, intimated earlier, I went away to study the next year, and I didn't come back from 77 to 81. That's when I returned.
And I lasted 2 more years teaching drawing and printmaking, and then I was shown the door. So that's my story in terms of St. Catherine's. But I've certainly had a strong connection with people here, with the programs, and with what happens in the art program and with the students in the college.
This sounds kind of like, I don't know, I'm connected still, but it was an abrupt departure.
Your question?
My name's Elizabeth Goodman Hallowell, and the influence of this program, I came here in '72, and I worked at the University of Minnesota. I took 20 courses on women writers while I worked at the university. And then I got connected to various people through Terry and Mary Lee George, who was in the program. They have sustained a salon, Terry has, for over 40 years, growing out of the richness of, I believe every woman and man in this room has experienced, experienced a great influence from the program here. I even traveled to Judy's studio. Cynthia LaCour became important to me in my life. I look around the room, and every woman and gentleman in this room have influenced from things that grew out of this program. We're attracted to it. It continued. It radiated. I worked at Moore as a publicist in '84. I got grant money so I could work with these wonderful women. And so it radiates. Even the pain that was gone through, it has radiated out all worldwide.
Thank you. So the speaker is talking about the legacy of WARM, and I think that might be my last question to the panel, after which I think they'll hang around for a little bit so you can talk with them individually. But what do each of you feel is the legacy of the Art School program?
Do this works. Can I say something first about your last question? It's about the resource person, and I'd just like to acknowledge the incredible part that Louise Osaneki Heinecker played. We were dealing with consciousness raising. Judy believed, and the curriculum was set up so that women got in touch with their stories and the things that, the important experiences of their lives. And then you figured out, instead of a course on painting or ceramics, you started with the feelings and what you wanted to say and what was needed to be said in the community. And then you figured out the skills that you needed to do it. And consciousness raising was a really big part. And when you get a place where women are encouraged to tell their stories to each other, and you create an atmosphere of trust, the stories are not always very pretty. You know, women at our sexuality workshop, 1/3, 10 of the 30 women's first sexual experience was as a child with an older male relative or close family friend. 10%. And that statistic goes out into the world. The stuff we were dealing with was beautiful and joyous and exciting, and it was very heavy. And Louise was just a godsend. She started doing an assertiveness training program. She worked with the anger workshop, and then she was available to catch the women as they dealt with these things. They dealt with it in community with each other, but then they were left with it as well, and Louise was there to help. I'm sorry.
And when Betsy and I did the Changes exhibition in interim in January of 1976, she had images that were called images of mutilation. They were paper images hung on meat hooks, and I had all these self-images that I had inflicted. They were paper or cardboard, two-dimensional wall pieces that had things that happened to them that you could imagine. One was self-image, unraveled, cut, connected. So I did a performance during the mother workshop. I used an apron, and I became a bandit mother, a mother who had taken things from me, working through anger about my mother. So we stepped in and out of
of the subject matter. It wasn't separated from the teachers, as has been said, talked about.
Legacy. What do you think is the legacy?
I channeled my feminism into the environment and started in 1989, going to Alaska and interviewing people in the oiled communities from the Exxon Valdez oil spill and telling their stories. And I have a studio in the California building. Every second Saturday we have open studio. I participate in that, and so that work, some of the work is up in my studio. But I moved into people's stories because I had already worked with women's stories of harassment, of rape in installations. So I just moved to the environment. Now I've gone back and forth. It's not like a straight road, as we all know. Life is this, right? A meander pattern, for me anyway.
I think that my legacy is that I figured out that everybody's got questions. And my question is, who gets to make art? And if you look at what I make, it's usually involving non-art issues, like going to Alaska, or talking about land, or talking to people about their experience of land, for instance. And one of the best things I do now with my life is teach painting to people who have dementia. And what they get from that, I think, is part of my legacy.
I think there was an important legacy in this department. We changed partly because we were able to hire new faculty like you, who came with a feminist perspective, like Todd, who came with a feminist perspective, etc., etc. We were able to take this department. We had a curriculum in the department before that was like a smorgasbord curriculum for the major. You needed, 10 courses or something. We became a developmental curriculum. We introduced a portfolio review at the stage of the sophomore year to attest a student having mastered the basics. And then again, later in the junior or even the first semester of the senior year, helping them find their own voice and their own work. That was a legacy from the Arts Corps program. The hiring of you people was a legacy from the Arts Corps program. And the other thing we did then, we moved from a prima donna kind of faculty to a faculty that was collegial, that had a common vision of what we were about and what we were doing, worked together. It was cohesive.
Is this on? I'd like to acknowledge Kathy Dillon, who was a member of the Art Corps. Would you stand up? And Cynthia LaCour, who spent the year in Los Angeles, the year of the Art Corps here, was part of the interim and became part of the Muse, which was, we weren't ready to give each other up or to stop the work that we were doing together. And so in April, when we knew the program was not going to go any farther than May, we formed Muse, a collective, which is again one of the legacies. And Cynthia, you can stand. So she took this film with us, as did the Women of Warm and the Film Collective, and many, many of you were part of this journey. Part of the Art Corps was that we had all of this wonderful money that our faculty had raised for us, and we had all these wonderful speakers and artists coming in, and those were all open to the community, which, you know, I never took another class that was set up to be for the class and for the community at the same time. And so many, many people were influenced. I think also because of the collectivity and the kind of work that we did together, I went out and I knew how to set up an exhibition and how to contact local sources to have space. And I brought that into the community. And there's a number of prominent artists here who had their first shows in a collective with me. And I had the skills that nobody else had. And so we shared those kinds of things out and made those circles bigger and bigger. And the legacy, what program that lasted a year, 43 years later, are people still talking about it?
Thank you all for coming and celebrating Women's History Month with us. And please join us in the lobby area for refreshments.
And tomorrow's International Women's Day.
Yeah.